journalist, and not an activist. But I think that journalists have played a large role in setting forth what people in this movement are saying. And Mary Beth is right. I mean, this is a full-fledged movement. There's nothing else you can possibly call it at this point. I also think it's really one of the most exciting youth movements we've seen in this country in a long time, particularly among women who do make up a majority of the people who are involved. And for feminists who have been fighting for wage drivers for a very long time, this is incredibly exciting to see that this conversation is getting into the mainstream at the level that it has. So, as a journalist, I think my first impression was just the images that are coming out of the movement. And I think that we can all agree that we were discussing earlier, the two most indelible images are coming out of Columbia. The first one being the red tape, particularly that people wore on their caps into graduation at different universities across the country. But as Mary Beth talked about, this was a group that started at Columbia in 2000 that started using red tape symbolically. And then, of course, Emma Sulkowitz's Mattress Project and the way that that's been translated across the country and become really, just one of the most powerful social justice images that I can recall, at least in the last decade. So, I would say that the first thing I was drawn to was the way that people have been so effective at using these personal narratives to move the needle in the media. And obviously, like many of us, began reading these horror tales online, beginning with a very moving story that Angie Epifani wrote in Amherst, when she was a student at Amherst, the way that she was treated by the school. And I think in June I read a story that was on New York Magazine's website, and I think it happened a few years ago, about a woman at Yale who was drugged, and she had this experience of just having this one memory, like a flashbulb pop, that she was crouched at the top of the stairs like an animal, and that was all that she remembered from that night. And I thought, I think I would like to do a story about this now. This is really stuff that is getting so deep into people's psyches. In terms, you can't really think about this for more than a little while before having it affect you. I think that that's also something that's been so significant here, is not only the visual images, but the stories, and the fact that because of the online medium, and I hate to say it, because the internet, this works, but the internet allows us to sit at home with our laptops or our phones and read, these incredibly personal stories that in the 90s would maybe have been in a zine, maybe Stassi would have written something, but you couldn't access the funnel. It's just like an endless river of stories if you really want to get into it. And so I think that the way that those stories, and the fact that people have been willing to put their real names, their full real names, and their faces to those stories, has completely changed the image of rape and rape victim that we had maybe even 10 or 15 years ago, where what would you think of if you thought of big rape scandal? You wouldn't think Emma and her mattress. You would think Kobe Bryant, powerful man, sitting at a table, lots of lawyers, lots of cameras, he's, being framed, or whatever. There was just a very different, just at the most basic level, very different image in people's minds in terms of, again, speaking about the mainstream media. So, for me, I think that pop culture is really my area of expertise. That's what I tend to write about, and the idea that we could write about the rape culture aspects of pop culture was obviously very interesting to me, and that while I do recognize what Mary Beth is saying about many different kinds of stories being within this one, area of calling yourself a survivor, I was really interested in, like, can we have a real conversation as a nation about young women's bodies, the ways that they're exploited, and the music industry, and the fashion industry, and really try to get back to a place where we don't just allow these images to wash over us, and we just don't talk about it like on Jezebel, but this becomes a major mainstream issue for everyone to discuss. And so, that is, I think that middle class and upper middle class women's voices certainly are privileged more than many other kinds of voices, but young women's voices have not been that privileged on the biggest mass levels in terms of, you still have to do your shoot for Maxim where you're half naked, even if you're like up for a Golden Globe award. Like, there is still this sense that the body comes first and the ideas come second. So, when I thought, like, well, how can I do a piece of writing for mainstream magazine that's, kind of complicated and doesn't just say, like, survivors speak out here, or terrible thing happens at X university. I thought, like, well, maybe I'll go find these students who are political, but they're writers. Like, I'll find, like, Gloria Steinem and Andrea Dworkin, and I'll find a poet. There's like tons of great poetry about rape, where there's some poets, and da-da-da. And I started to call around and say, well, who should I talk to? And everybody said, well, the people you have to talk to are the activists, because the activists are the people who are actually doing this work and making the change, and they're writing their speeches for the rallies. They're not sitting around writing, these 25-page exegesis on how, it's all probably so far, but like generally action is happening. And if action is happening, you don't have a lot of time to stand back and also like reflect on that action. So I thought, I would like to try to capture the actual, what's really going on, which is action going through, Emma Silkowitz, this amazing organizer, Zoe Rodolphe Starr, and these two incredible organizers were living in California at the time, from Enclave on campus. And I thought, like, okay, I'll focus on these people who are a nice swath of what's going on in terms of the action. So I thought I would show tonight some of like what this action looks like. I will try. And I'm going to show some slides of what it would look like if you went to one of the rallies in Columbia. I do not know these people, so it will be hard for me to identify them. But Mary Beth, if you want to say anything, I might call upon you. But this is, so there were two rallies, and the first one was a bit intimate. It was maybe about 300 students, and I have to say it is really the most affecting experience I've ever had at the protest. It was really unbelievable. And the second one was also unbelievable in its own way. That's what these slides are from, and it was much bigger. It was about 1,000 students, even maybe more, and it was so incredibly well organized. Like, I really have never seen a protest this well organized. So I believe they're promenading from Barnard to Columbia this morning. People gathered at the Barnard gates. There were 28 mattresses, one to represent each survivor, or just a Columbia-affiliated person who had made a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights about Columbia and sexual assault. And as Emma has said many times, these mattresses are easy to carry when you are in a group. I do not know what the project is, do you? No, project. Okay, this is a very good project. Some people put X's on their clothing. I think that sticker said, "Imagine a world without rape," and then was written "Create" on top of it. So this is when everybody was lining up. And one really amazing thing about this protest was that so many students from different organizations on campus, different student organizations, gathered to support the survivors and carry these, which was also something that I think is really a rarity in terms of college activism, to see so many different groups come together in solidarity, and that was like, really amazing. These people are carrying mattresses. This is the Shakespeare, really?
Yeah, so this is kind of a similar, actually, relationship between theater and the activism that I think is coming out through the play Rape of Blue Priest, and that these actors realized that rape was being portrayed in the play that they're acting out, and they wanted to support survivors and really connect it to the activism that was going on as a way of being sort of more conscientious about their work.
It started to rain, so there was a lot of holding these mattresses overhead. And this is the lineup and basically across Broadway here. There were tons of news cameras with those satellites going up. And then they walked up the stairs to Bench Columbia, kind of walked across the square, and then the stairs go up to like the most important building, which is the library. And all the students from the stairs with their mattresses.
And something about Little Library is that it's not actually a library, it's the home of the administration, so it's a very symbolic, like, we are, standing in front of you because, you are the decision makers, you're the one that have, for the most part, been hurting survivors and silencing them, so it's kind of symbolic in terms of the space as well.
So you can get a sense of how many people were here. I mean, it started to rain and nobody moved an inch. This was really just such a dramatic and, just profoundly moving, really call to arms. And here's Emma, apparently. She couldn't hear very well, apparently, so the bullhorn is right there. This is it. And this was one of the other organizers.
Ali Ricard.
And now, I don't know why it's not, just some solidarity going on. Oh, right. And there's Mary Beth. And one who was on the loan, who's across the street. It was raining. It really was raining. It really rained. And then, so towards the end of the protest, it was January. And so we, the Delphi Star, kind of said, okay, we're all going this way. And all the students who had the mattresses started carrying them the other direction, where they had come from, and started walking towards the president's house. And while they were walking, I was walking with some random students who were discussing how President Bollinger had put out I guess it's an editorial or an article about sexual assault at Columbia and the New Republic the same day as this protest, and what exactly he was trying to get across. Sort of a muddled editorial. So then they reached the president's house, and very nicely, I thought, stacked these mattresses. Because really, they should have just maybe thrown them. And stacked these mattresses up in front of his house. And then there was one mattress that I couldn't figure out. It was the box spring. It was a box spring itself that had the 12 demands.
I think it was just on the bottom.
It was
they
just
flipped
the
it
bottom.
over.
Okay. So one of these, let's see if there's a picture. Here's Zoe. Here are the demands. So unfortunately I don't have a copy of these, but these were the 12 demands that they made that they were asking for from the president. So there was actual purpose to this experience. It's not a performative experience. And things like, allowing survivors to recoup money and lost tuition, and the evaluation of the program every couple of years, like every 2 years. And I don't know if it was, I think it was reopening the case, Sokowitz's case, which they have so far not wanted to do. And there's Ali and Zoe and Emma, and I believe it says we can take one serious photo, one non-serious photo. And this was really great, which was, I don't know if this was spontaneous or if this was part of the plan, but somebody took some red tape and put, this is a very kind of ornate wood and, iron cast door, and took the red tape and stuck the 12 demands right up there, just in case you didn't read the,
if I can just interject here, so I saw these photos earlier this week, and when I saw this one, the first thing I thought of was the sort of maybe apocryphal Martin Luther nailing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm a giant nerd. Sorry.
No, this was. When I say that this was a well thought out protest, I mean this was a majorly well thought out protest. To be very articulate about. So. I heard that after this experience, I hear they're very nicely stacked. After this protest, the mattresses were taken away very quickly, and that the organization that had their name on the space as the responsible party was going to be fined for taking away these mattresses, which I guess is not really a surprise. I think that maybe I will not read all these quotes. I was going to read you some quotes from the protest, but we can do that another time. And suffice to say, I think, one of the things you've seen at Columbia is the building upon the original foundation, which is the Title IX complaint that was filed by many students. And that complaint brought some media attention and put some pressure on the administration. The mattress when Emma began carrying the mattress, that's put some more pressure on. But now you're at a level where there's an enormous amount of people in the student body who are really focused on this issue and really want to know what Columbia is going to do about it beyond what they've done so far. And so, in a way that I almost think you couldn't have predicted 6 months ago, Columbia has become really, as far as the East Coast goes, the most, like the fulcrum basically of this national movement, and it's really exciting to see where it's going to go next.